The sound of knuckles rapping against wood echoed through Mark's small apartment like thunder. He froze, a spoonful of dinosaur-shaped mac and cheese suspended halfway to his 6-year-old daughter's mouth. Nobody ever knocked on their door at 8:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. Nobody except bill collectors, and Mark had finally caught up on those last month. "Daddy?" Emma's wide eyes found his, mac and cheese forgotten. "It's okay, sweetie. Finish your dinner." Mark set the spoon down and wiped his hands on his jeans, heart hammering against his ribs. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. Mark peered through the peephole and his stomach dropped. Vanessa Chen, his boss of 3 years, stood in the hallway, arms crossed tightly over her chest, her normally perfect posture rigid with tension. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that will tug at your heartstrings. Your support means everything. Mark opened the door, confusion etched across his tired face. "Catherine? What are you?" "You're fired." The words burst from her like she'd been holding them back for miles. Her dark eyes flashed with something that looked suspiciously like hurt beneath the anger. Mark stood frozen, one hand still on the doorknob. "What?" Catherine pushed past him into the apartment, her designer heels clicking against the worn linoleum. 3 years, Mark. 3 years of hints and opportunities and, she stopped abruptly when she spotted Emma at the kitchen table, dinosaur mac and cheese forgotten as she stared wide-eyed at the strange woman who had just burst into their home. "You have a daughter," Catherine said, her voice suddenly soft. "Yes," Mark replied, closing the door slowly. "This is Emma." "Emma, this is Ms. Chen. My boss." He paused. Or, former boss, apparently. The story of how Mark Thompson and Vanessa Chen reached this breaking point began 3 years earlier, when Mark, newly widowed and desperate for work with flexible hours, joined Chen Innovations as an entry-level graphic designer. Catherine had built her marketing firm from nothing, transforming it into one of the most sought-after boutique agencies in the city through sheer determination and brilliance. She demanded excellence, punctuality, and dedication from her employees. Mark possessed all 3 qualities in abundance, but he also carried something else, grief that weighed on him like concrete, and the responsibility of raising Emma alone after his wife Sarah's sudden death from an undiagnosed heart condition. On his first day, Catherine had looked at his portfolio with sharp, assessing eyes. "Your work shows promise, but it's safe. I need designers who push boundaries." "I can push boundaries," Mark had assured her, desperation making his voice steadier than he felt. He needed this job. The medical bills from Sarah's final days had drained their savings, and daycare costs for Emma were astronomical. Catherine had given him a long look. "We'll see." And see she did. Over the next 3 years, Mark proved himself invaluable. He never missed deadlines, his designs improved dramatically under Catherine's exacting standards, and clients specifically requested his work. What Catherine didn't see, what Mark carefully hid, were the late nights after Emma was asleep, when he would work until his eyes burned to make up for leaving precisely at 5 every day to pick up his daughter. He never mentioned Emma at work. Never brought her to office functions. Never explained why he couldn't stay late or come in on weekends. He simply delivered exceptional work within the constraints of his schedule and hoped it would be enough. It was enough for the job, but not enough for what Catherine had begun to want from him. The hints started subtly. Catherine lingering by his desk to discuss projects long after the points had been made. Casual touches to his shoulder when reviewing his work. Invitations to lunch that he politely declined, citing prior commitments. Coffee appearing on his desk in the morning, always black with 1 sugar, exactly how he liked it. Mark noticed these things in a distant way, filing them away as the actions of a demanding boss who appreciated his work. His mind had no space for other interpretations. Between raising Emma, keeping their small apartment functioning, and excelling at his job, Mark's emotional bandwidth was stretched to breaking. The part of him that might have recognized Catherine's interest had gone dormant when they lowered Sarah's casket into the ground. Catherine, meanwhile, had never been one to pursue. In her personal life as in business, people came to her. But something about Mark's quiet competence, his gentle humor that emerged in rare moments, and yes, the mystery of his life outside work, drew her in. For the first time in her carefully constructed life, Vanessa Chen found herself giving hints that went unnoticed. Until tonight. "Daddy, is everything okay?" Emma's small voice broke the tense silence in the apartment. Mark ran a hand through his hair. "Everything's fine, Em. Why don't you go pick out a book for bedtime? I need to talk to Ms. Chen for a minute." Emma slid from her chair, eyeing Catherine curiously before padding down the hallway to her bedroom. "You have a daughter," Catherine repeated, this time with understanding dawning in her eyes. "Yes," Mark said simply. "Emma is 6. Her mother died when she was 3. Catherine sank onto the couch, her anger deflating. "You never said anything. I keep my personal and professional lives separate." Mark remained standing, arms crossed defensively. It seemed safer that way. "Safer?" Catherine's eyebrows rose. "I needed this job, Catherine. Single parents don't exactly scream reliable employee to most employers. I couldn't risk you thinking I wouldn't be committed enough." Catherine stared at him, incredulous. "So instead of telling me about your situation, you've been what, working nights? Weekends? Is that why you always have shadows under your eyes?" Mark shrugged, uncomfortable with her scrutiny. "I make it work. And all those times I invited you for drinks after work? For dinner? The company retreat last summer?" "Emma," Mark said simply. "I don't have family nearby. Babysitters are expensive, and he stopped, suddenly realizing what Catherine was saying. "Wait. Those weren't work obligations?" Catherine laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. "For someone so perceptive in your designs, you are remarkably blind to some things, Mark Thompson." Mark sank into the armchair across from her, mind racing to recontextualize 3 years of interactions. "You were interested in me? Romantically?" "Yes," Catherine admitted, her professional composure cracking to reveal vulnerability beneath. "And when you kept declining every invitation, kept maintaining this professional distance despite what I thought was obvious interest on my part, I assumed you weren't interested but were too concerned about your job to say so directly. So you came here to fire me because you thought I was, what? Stringing you along?" Catherine winced. "It sounds ridiculous when you put it that way." "It is ridiculous," Mark said, but without heat. "You could have just asked me directly." "That's not how I operate," Catherine admitted. "In business or in life. I don't chase people, Mark. And I don't notice hints," Mark countered. "I've been in survival mode for 3 years. Everything that isn't Emma or work just doesn't register." They sat in silence for a moment, the absurdity of the situation settling around them. "Daddy?" Emma appeared in the hallway, clutching a well-worn copy of Where the Wild Things Are. "I'm ready for my story." Mark glanced at Catherine, then back to his daughter. "I'll be right there, sweetie." Catherine stood, smoothing her skirt with nervous hands. "I should go. This was unprofessional of me." "Wait," Mark said, surprising himself. "Are you hungry? We have plenty of dinosaur mac and cheese." Catherine blinked, then a small smile tugged at her lips. "Dinosaur mac and cheese sounds perfect, actually. Emma, would it be okay if Ms. Chen joined us for dinner and maybe story time?" Mark asked, watching his daughter carefully. Emma studied Catherine with solemn eyes. "Do you like dinosaurs?" "I do," Catherine replied seriously. "Especially the Triceratops. That's my favorite too." Emma's face lit up. "Daddy, she can stay. And so Catherine Chen, CEO of Chen Innovations, found herself sitting at a small kitchen table eating dinosaur-shaped pasta while a 6-year-old explained the finer points of paleontology with the authority only a first grader can muster. Mark watched them, something long dormant stirring in his chest. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was possibility. The possibility that there might be room in their lives for something beyond survival. Later, after Emma was tucked into bed and Catherine had surprised them both by doing all the character voices during story time, they sat on Mark's small balcony with mugs of tea. "So," Mark said, "am I actually fired?" Catherine laughed softly. "No. That was an emotional reaction I'm not proud of." "Good, because I really need this job. You're one of my best designers, Mark. I wouldn't let you go over something personal." She paused. "But I think we need to establish some boundaries." Mark nodded. "Agreed. And maybe I need to be more transparent about my situation. The team would understand. We could make accommodations. I've managed so far." "At what cost?" Catherine asked gently. "You look exhausted all the time, Mark." He couldn't argue with that. "It's been hard," he admitted. "Harder than I let myself acknowledge most days." "You don't have to do everything alone," Catherine said, then quickly added, "I mean, the team could help. Flexible hours, work-from-home days. We have other parents at the company." Mark studied her in the dim light from the kitchen. Catherine Chen was beautiful, yes, but more than that, she was strong in ways he recognized and respected. She had built something from nothing, just as he was trying to do with his and Emma's life after Sarah. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "Barging into your home and yelling at you?" Catherine grimaced. "For caring enough to be angry," Mark replied. "It's been a long time since anyone cared that much about what I did or didn't do." Catherine set her mug down carefully. "I should go. It's late, and we both have work tomorrow." At the door, she turned to him. "For the record, I'm not looking for anything from you, Mark. I respect that your priority is Emma, as it should be. But maybe we could start with honesty?" "Honesty," Mark agreed. "I can do that." After she left, Mark stood at the window watching Catherine walk to her car. For the first time in 3 years, he allowed himself to really look at a woman who wasn't Sarah, to acknowledge attraction and possibility without immediately shutting it down. The following weeks brought changes to Mark's work life. Catherine called a team meeting where Mark finally explained his situation. To his surprise, his colleagues rallied around him. Melissa from accounting, herself a single mother, offered to share her babysitter's contact information. James from the creative team volunteered his teenage daughter for occasional sitting. The office manager adjusted Mark's hours to better align with Emma's school schedule. And Catherine kept her distance professionally, but made it clear through small gestures that she was there. A children's museum pass left anonymously on his desk. A recommendation for a family-friendly restaurant. Books for Emma appearing mysteriously. Mark began to notice things he'd been too exhausted to see before. The way Catherine's eyes crinkled when she was genuinely pleased with a design. How she always remembered everyone's coffee orders but pretended not to care about such trivial details. The quiet authority she commanded without ever raising her voice. 6 months after the night Catherine knocked on his door, Mark finally worked up the courage to knock on hers, metaphorically speaking. "Would you like to have dinner with Emma and me this Saturday?" he asked after a project meeting. "She's been asking about you." Catherine's surprise was evident, but quickly replaced by a warm smile. "I'd like that very much." Dinner led to a Sunday at the park, which led to movie nights and museum visits. Catherine slipped into their lives with surprising ease, her organizational skills and efficiency complementing Mark's more laid-back parenting style. Emma adored her, especially after discovering Catherine could braid hair in complex patterns Mark's fingers could never master. It wasn't always smooth. Catherine had never imagined herself in a maternal role and sometimes retreated when things became too domestic. Mark still struggled with guilt over moving forward after Sarah. Emma had moments of confusion and jealousy. But slowly, carefully, they built something new together. Not a replacement for what was lost, but something valuable in its own right. 1 year to the day after Catherine had knocked on Mark's door and yelled, "You're fired," she knocked again. This time, when Mark opened it, she was holding a small box. "I'm not proposing," she said quickly, seeing his expression. "It's too soon for that. But I wanted to mark the occasion." Inside the box was a key. "To my house," Catherine explained. "For emergencies, or whenever you and Emma want to come over." Mark took the key, understanding the significance of this gesture from a woman who guarded her personal space as carefully as she did her heart. "Thank you," he said, pulling her into an embrace. From the kitchen table, Emma watched them with a smile. "Are you going to kiss now? Because if you are, I'm going to cover my eyes." Catherine laughed, the sound bright and unguarded in a way it never was at the office. "What do you think, Mark? Should we scandalize your daughter?" Mark's answer was to pull Catherine closer and press his lips to hers, ignoring Emma's theatrical gagging sounds in the background. Later that night, after Emma was asleep and Catherine had gone home, though not without several more kisses, Mark sat on the balcony looking at the city lights. He thought about how life could change in an instant, sometimes for the worse, as it had when Sarah died, but sometimes for the better, as it had when Catherine knocked on his door in anger and stayed for dinosaur mac and cheese. He thought about how grief and love could coexist, neither diminishing the other. How Emma would always know about her mother, but now had another strong woman in her life to look up to. How he had learned that surviving wasn't the same as living, and that he was finally doing the latter again. Mark Thompson, who had once been so focused on keeping his head above water that he missed every hint his boss had thrown his way, now found himself looking forward rather than just getting through. All because Catherine Chen had been brave enough, or angry enough, to knock on his door and yell, "You're fired." Sometimes, Mark reflected, the worst moments can lead to the best beginnings. You just have to be awake enough to notice when they arrive. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories about love, loss, and second chances. Remember that sometimes the things we miss might be exactly what we need, and it's never too late to open the door to new possibilities.